The beginning of a work of fiction is perhaps the most important part of it. As the first element of the work that the audience experiences, the beginning must be able to grab the viewer's attention and motivate them to complete the rest of the piece. As such, the first episode of the 2016 anime Sangatsu no Lion can provide a case study of a strong introduction. It relies on visual storytelling rather than verbal narration to introduce both its protagonist's background as well as the emotional conflicts that embroil him throughout the rest of the series. By relaying the plot through visuals and symbolism, the creators of the show are able to establish a consistent tone throughout the first 10 minutes of the episode. This tone allows the audience to understand the main character's persona not simply by seeing the details of his life story, but by experiencing his emotions and forming an empathic attachment to him that will carry the viewer throughout the rest of the series. The narrative portion of the episode begins with a dream sequence flashback, showing a distorted image of a woman berating the protagonist, Kiriyama. In this sequence, the woman accuses him of being a zero, in her own words, someone who has no friends or family, and no reason to exist. During this flashback, images are shown in a stylized black and white art style of Kiriyama staring grimly towards the camera, while being enveloped in harsh wind. The last of these images shows only an empty background, with Kiriyama himself having dissolved into nothing. While being a direct, narrated explanation of the main character's personality, or at least of how one other person in his life has interpreted him, the visuals of the scene present this information emotionally as well. The art style obscures the woman's face while her identity is left unexplained, causing her to seem more mysterious and her words more threatening. The visual aesthetic of the scene further builds upon this feeling of hostility, and with an imagery of blowing wind and still water, creates a feeling of coldness as we see Kiriyama eventually disappear. When Kiriyama awakens to an empty room with no strange woman to be found, the audience is left to wonder as to their relationship, and if the emotions that this scene expresses are common in Kiriyama's life. Even while using brief verbal narration, the scene is able to amplify its meaning through imagery and editing, and it leaves the audience with questions to consider rather than with clearly defined facts. The following scene, in which Kiriyama awakens and begins his daily routine, is vital in communicating his persona to the audience. It communicates the information in a purely visual manner as well, allowing for the viewer to focus on the atmosphere of the situation while absorbing story details organically. From the first wide shot of the room, we notice several key design elements that inform the viewer as to Kiriyama's life history and personality. Most prominent is the room's emptiness. Illuminated by light streaming in from the riverside windows, we see a total absence of a typical house's objects or paraphernalia. There are no desks, televisions, or computers, and no posters or art on the walls. From this, the viewer can gather that the woman's words were correct in some degree. Kiriyama displays no visible emotional attachment to the things that a normal person would. There exists one exception to this, a single item poised beside Kiriyama's bed, a shogi board. With their attention drawn to the shogi board by the absence of other objects, the viewer can immediately discern the disproportionate importance it must hold in Kiriyama's life. A quick close shot of the board's surroundings shows several books on shogi strategy, and several empty bowls of ramen, and a basic image of Kiriyama's life can then be imagined. He is a shogi player, dedicated so entirely to improving at the game that his life has become devoid of other emotions. Other than the shogi board, a few boxes do sit unopened near the door of the room, telling the viewer that Kiriyama has only just moved to this space, and that he is beginning a new phase of his life. The meanings behind these objects are not explained verbally, but are understood by the viewer implicitly. This relation of information is accompanied by the relative silence of this scene in comparison to the dream sequence. The scene is limited in terms of movement and sound, creating a quiet, solemn mood that the audience can use to relate to Kiriyama's own feelings about his room. Without using narration or dialogue, the animators are able to communicate the character's basic living situation in an efficient and natural way so that the pacing and atmosphere of the scene can develop. Following this scene, Kiriyama leaves his house and walks through the town to the train station. The environments that Kiriyama walks through in this sequence become the sets upon which much of the series' drama occur. During this scene, a soft acoustic French song plays, joining with a montage of scenes from everyday life to create a contemplative and calm atmosphere. The audience can tell through the music and through Kiriyama's facial expressions that he is in a depressed and introspective mood. Again, without breaking the pacing or tone, the animators are able to relay information about the setting as well as communicate Kiriyama's emotional state as he walks through the town. Kiriyama reaches his destination as the song fades out, and the audience sees another vital set piece, the Shogi Hall, where many of Kiriyama's internal and external conflicts will play out over the course of this series. The camera lingers on the hall as it towers over Kiriyama, signifying its importance. He continues to the playing room, a stark, empty space occupied only by shogi tables. Kiriyama sits down, and moments later his opponent enters, an older man. Kiriyama's reaction to the man is shown in a close shot of his grimacing face, distinguished from the preceding animation by use of bright, hazy colors, informing the viewer that Kiriyama feels an emotional pain from seeing the old man. The older man breaks the vocal silence of the preceding minutes by asking Kiriyama how he's doing and speaking Kiriyama's first name in the process. The audience can immediately see that their relationship is intimate, as the usage of first names in Japanese culture is restricted to only close friends and family. The man sits down and offers a few other short lines of dialogue. He mentions the weather and remarks that he should be talking about something other than the weather, given their situation. The situation is not straightforwardly explained, but given the information already established, the viewer can guess that it might relate to Kiriyama having just moved. The episode continues apace, not dwelling on the specific details of the story, allowing the mood to form without interruption. The two begin a game of shogi, played out in slow, deliberate shots of each moving piece. Interspersed between these shots are images from Kiriyama's childhood, in which the old man appears. You see Kiriyama entering the shogi hall alongside the man and two other children, presumably Kiriyama's siblings. Kiriyama advances in the tournament and wins, only to find that his siblings could not make it to the same heights that he has. He is left alone as he watches them walking away from him looking dejected. Like before, no extra time is taken to explain these events through dialogue or narration. The audience is expected to decipher the meaning themselves, while also taking in the atmosphere of the scene simultaneously. The match ends as Kiriyama's father says, "There's nothing." The old man's words have a double meaning, signifying narratively that Kiriyama's father has no more possible moves and so has lost the match, and as a symbolic resolution to Kiriyama's reflections. One last flashback appears as Kiriyama sits in a vast dark coldness, surrounded by falling snow, juxtaposed by an identical image of Kiriyama as a young boy. Kiriyama understands that his success in shogi has, in both his childhood and his adult life, pushed away his family and left him alone. Kiriyama's father verbally confirms their relationship and claims that his siblings are worried about him. As the father walks out of the playing room, Kiriyama mutters his first line of dialogue, saying, "That's a lie." By waiting for this moment to allow Kiriyama to speak, the show demonstrates the importance of this line and the conviction with which Kiriyama believes it. The use of a simultaneous shogi game and a series of flashbacks allows the viewer to understand Kiriyama's past and the emotions that his past decisions have left with him, as well as how those decisions and feelings continue to weigh on him in his current life. By now, the audience can gather a total image of Kiriyama's family life. We have seen his new apartment, as well as his strange relationship with his father. The audience also knows of the event that forced Kiriyama away from his family, and have had confirmed the feelings that Kiriyama's siblings hold of him. At this point, one could even predict the identity of the woman in the dream sequence as Kiriyama's sister Kyoko, insulting him out of spite at his success. With only a handful of lines of dialogue, the first 10 minutes of the episode totally describe the main character's life history and internal struggles. Furthermore, by relying on visuals rather than dialogue and narration, a strong mood is created throughout the scenes, and the audience is able to use this to empathize with the emptiness and loneliness that Kiriyama struggles with. By showing the audience Kiriyama's life through imagery and sound, rather than telling the audience about Kiriyama's life through direct narration, the creators are able to produce an empathic understanding of the character's emotions and simultaneously explain why he feels them.